When you book a luxury sleeper bus for an overnight trip, you're looking for comfort, convenience, and of course, safety. But a whole string of absolutely horrific accidents in India has pulled back the curtain on a terrifying reality. A lot of these buses, they're basically rolling death traps. So let's get into exactly why these modern-looking coaches are turning into these fiery tragedies. 20. Just think about that number. That's how many people lost their lives in a single fiery crash in Andhra Pradesh just this past October. And the truly chilling part, this isn't some freak accident. It's a pattern, and it's one that's happening again and again with terrifying regularity. I mean, just look at this timeline from Nagpur to Jaisalmer to Kurnool. The stories are just eerily similar. A collision, a fire that spreads way too fast, and a catastrophic loss of life. These aren't just accidents, you see. They're symptoms of a much deeper systemic failure. So what is that failure? Well, it all starts with a fundamental deception. To really understand the problem, you have to look past the fancy brand names you see painted on the side of the bus. Because what you think you're riding in and what you're actually riding in, well, they're often two completely different things. And right here, this is the core of the deception. You see a brand you trust on the side of that bus, and you assume, naturally, that the whole thing was built in their factory with all their safety standards. But the reality? Bus operators often just buy the engine and the chassis, basically the metal frame and wheels, from the manufacturer. The entire body, the part you're actually sitting and sleeping in, is built somewhere else entirely, in a local, unregulated workshop. And that's where that promise of safety completely falls apart. So this unregulated building process, this is exactly how a vehicle gets transformed into a potential coffin on wheels. Let's really break down the anatomy of how these modifications create such a deadly, deadly environment. So what decisions are being made in these workshops that turn a simple bus into a raging fire trap? It really boils down to a lethal combination of factors. And look, it's not just one thing. It's a whole cascade of terrible choices. They're using cheap, highly flammable materials for the body itself. They're making all sorts of unsafe modifications, like tacking on extra fuel tanks. The interior is filled with flammable curtains and cushions. And maybe worst of all, the whole space is designed in a way that literally traps people inside when every single second counts. Just let that sink in for a moment. The very shell of the bus, the structure that's supposed to protect you, is often made of stuff that can just go up in flames. And crash testing on these custom-built bodies? Forget about it. It hardly ever happens. So in a collision, the risk of a fire isn't just high, it's immediate and catastrophic. And here is the horrible irony in all of this. That sleeper feature, the very thing sold as a luxury, becomes a death trap. The narrow aisles, the little berths, the curtains, all the things that give you privacy, they also create a deadly obstacle course. When a fire breaks out and you have only seconds to escape, you find yourself trapped in a maze with emergency exits that are often blocked or impossible to get to. Okay, so if these buses are so obviously dangerous, you're probably asking, where are the regulators? And that brings us to the next huge layer of this problem, a complete and total system failure. The rules to prevent all this, they exist on paper, but in the real world, they have almost no reach. Officially, yes, there are rules. They're called the Automotive Industry Standards, or AIS, and they're laid out by the Road Transport Ministry. These standards are supposed to cover everything, from how strong the bus body is to fire safety systems. They exist for the sole purpose of preventing these exact kinds of tragedies. But here's the reality, and this is a direct quote from our source material. These are seldom followed. It's that simple. Having rules on the books means absolutely nothing if no one is enforcing them, and in this world of custom bus building, they are pretty much universally ignored. And here you can see that whole chain of failure laid out. The standards exist. They say you need fire detection and suppression systems, but then you have the body shops which almost never follow these critical rules. And the final most important link? Enforcement. It's basically absent. There's no regular monitoring and almost no crash testing of the final bus you're about to board. It's a failure from the top all the way to the bottom. Now, I know this is a really grim picture, but it's not hopeless. The problem is complicated, sure, but the solutions are actually surprisingly clear. So, what would a real blueprint for safety actually look like?
The path forward really involves four crucial steps. First, you have to strengthen the rules themselves with a specific code just for sleeper buses. Second, mandate crash testing for the entire bus, not just the frame, the whole thing. Third, and this is the big one, you need strict and regular enforcement. And finally, a simple change that could save lives: require pre-trip safety briefings, just like on an airplane, so passengers actually know where the emergency exits are. Really, what this all boils down to is a fundamental shift in how we think about safety. It can't be an afterthought, something that gets bolted on in some workshop. It has to be a core part of the vehicle's design and manufacturing from the very beginning, guaranteed at a factory level.
So ultimately, the roadmap to safety is crystal clear. The standards, the testing, the enforcement, we know what needs to be done. The final, and I think the most important question, is really one of will. Who is going to step up to enforce this journey and make sure that no more lives are lost in these sleeping death traps?